What is the love language of your clients? Yes, you heard me right, love language. We're talking the digital marketing agency client relationship and how to make it work today on The Edge.
Go! Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. Powered by your digital marketing pioneers, Site Strategics. This week's featured guest is Garrett Sussman, Demand Generation Manager at iPullRank. Now, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
Welcome back to The Edge. This is Edge of the Web Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks. Every week we bring you amazing guests to talk about digital marketing trending tactics. We unpack a key marketing topic for our digital marketing audience. Whether you're part of an agency, a freelancer, or part of a firm, this show is for you. So check out all of the recent shows over at edgeofthewebradio.com. Edgeofthewebradio.com. Edge of the Web is actually brought to you by our title sponsor, Site Strategics, pioneers in the agile digital marketing realm. Their core specialties are SEO, technical SEO, core web vitals optimization, SEM, social media management and marketing, conversion rate optimization, and omni-channel media marketing. Agile marketing that actually works. If you're interested in what we can do for you, give us a call, 877-SEO for web or 877-736-4932. If you want to actually check out some of the most recent shows, check out the Bill Slawski interviews, the Mark Traphagen interviews, as well as Roger Monti. If you're interested in being part of the show, just drop us a line at info@edgeofthewebradio.com. Make sure that you check out our weekly news podcast covering the most recent digital marketing news of the day, as well as Google core algorithm updates. Set your reminders on YouTube to get notified when we post the videos as well. Now let's meet this week's industry expert guest. So Garrett Sussman is Demand Generation Manager over at iPullRank. He's got 10 years of experience in digital marketing. He was previously the head of marketing at Traject, a development firm of white label marketing tools based out of Bellevue, Washington. He also has a long stint, about 5 years, with Grade.us, a reputation management service that for agencies to be able to monitor their clients' reviews. And before that, he was the affiliate marketing manager over at 99 Design. So he's had a heck of a long run in developing resources for agencies. He's got quite a unique position in the digital marketing industry. He's been providing white label reporting resources to agencies to use to communicate to their clients. He's also contributed to the thought leadership in our community with a podcast, Agency Ahead, which launched at the start of COVID last year and has he has a number of the most well-known figures in our industry: Jason Swank, Ben Fisher, Alita Solis, Carolyn Leiden, Aaron White, Rand Fishkin, Joy Hawkins, and more. His show was most exclusively focused for marketing agencies, which caught my attention, and I wanted to have him on the show to talk about this in particular. He literally has had 100 shows on his podcast since May 24th. That's a little bit aggressive, and boy, the content's fantastic. So, Garrett, welcome to the show today.
Aaron, thank you so much for having me. I from one podcaster to another, it is a privilege to join you here.
Fantastic. Well, we certainly appreciate as you're a newcomer to podcasting, but boy, making a bit of a noise there. 100 shows in 1 year. That's if I do the math right, all right, that's 2 shows a week. How'd you plow through all that, and how in the world did you stay sane through all that?
You know what? I'm gonna admit it's really easy, just because the podcast was a bit of a guilty pleasure. It was just an opportunity to geek out over, the various different marketing channels and strategies with people in our industry who I respect the heck out of, whether they are established and have been doing it for a while, or they're really just up and coming, starting their careers, but contributing some really cool ideas from the get-go. So it was just a lot of fun. You know how it is talking to these folks.
Oh, it's a blast. And, it is a guilty pleasure, but at the same time, you learn so much from each and every experience with these individuals. And it can't do anything but level up your skills, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that was really interesting is it actually helped me lead to my current position, because I would start talking specifically to a lot of tech SEOs.
Right.
And I personally didn't do a lot of tech SEO, but I found it fascinating the way that had such an influence on rankings. And, there's this this marriage of like right brain, left brain when it comes to tech SEO, right? You
Yep.
need this analytic skill to understand the technical aspect of the coding, but there's very much a right brain creativity of being able to surface insights and solve problems. And so, that's how I kind of ended up joining the agency world with Mike King at iPullRank.
Very good, very good. Well, it's interesting that you were learning new. I wouldn't even consider it disciplines, but it's also thinking styles, right? That's where you were really exploring and be able to learn a different way to actually take on content. And there's certainly, I mean, we highly recommend the 100 shows that you did for our listeners to dive into Garrett's work, because there's some great contributors there. And you really did explore the dimensions of how a marketing firm, a digital marketing agency needs to engage in not only its own skill sets, but its learning discipline, but also as well as its relationships with clients. But before anything else, give us your backstory. Give us a little bit more that we don't know from the bio that I gave.
Oh man. So, coming out of college, I was doing the teaching thing. I joined a program called Teach for America and taught little third graders, elementary school in New Orleans, Louisiana. My timing was absolutely awful because it was right when Hurricane Katrina happened. And so 3 feet of water. I had this purple leather couch in my place. We couldn't go back for 3 months. I come back and it was like, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. We had mold of all colors on this couch. And so, stopped teaching. I got a little burnt out after that whole experience, but still love it. I mean, someday I might go back and become like a high school teacher again, but started roaming around, was obsessed with the startup culture. And that's how I ended up going out to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. I stumbled on this little tiny Australian startup called 99 Designs.
Yeah.
And that is a graphic design marketplace. And that was really cool because we were working with entrepreneurs at first who are starting their businesses, who are, inspired and want to change the world and need their first logo, and then start focusing on agencies. And that's where a lot of that interest initially came, was, how agencies could get graphic design work done for their clients, because design is so important, so essential when it comes to marketing.
It is very much so, and so there's a great pathway of growing into understanding the needs of an agency, and also the factors that an agency can't deploy fully, that they always need that additional support, either subcontractors or reporting tools and utilization. You can't build everything internal. It's just not, it's cost prohibitive to do so. However, I do have to give you some condolences on the couch. Do you have any pictures about that couch? I mean, that makes me sad, sir. It really does.
It made me sad too, as well. But, gone but not forgotten. There are pictures somewhere on the internet somewhere.
Okay, we're going to have to track those down. All right, so all joking aside, you started to learn a lot more of what the agencies were looking for and the needs that are out there, and be able to match needs to audiences. So again, this is why I wanted to bring you around here. I have a bit of a campfire, a bit of a talk about some of the challenges when it comes down to client relationships and the needs of an agency. But there's a lot of clients that we work with as an agency that would never think about hiring internally at all, especially for an on-staff SEO. However, an enterprise level organizations certainly do staff internally. I mean, by and large, small, medium-sized companies don't really think about an internal marketing individual or team, or they haven't considered it. I actually caught an LSEO.com survey that interviewed 100 companies and industry experts that had one question: do I hire an SEO firm, or do I hire an in-house employee? Let me restate that. Do I hire an SEO firm or an in-house employee? Would you believe that 81% of the respondents, a small data set, they actually preferred hiring an agency over an in-house marketing employee to perform their SEO? Now, we had a little bit of conversation prior to this show. Part of the challenge here is skill sets, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's really interesting, especially right now. We're seeing a lot of people trying to hire in-house SEOs, and we were talking about the left brain, right brain, sort of the technical, aspects, and then the insight surfacing. And there just isn't, I mean, maybe it's because it's still a relatively newish, evolving industry. I mean, SEO is still an $80 billion industry at this point. And yet, how do you even teach it in school?
Right.
Like, are there good, academic programs? Not really. Most SEOs, like most coders, are learning on their own at home, learning best practices from blogs and, what SaaS tools are putting out, via ebooks. And so it's still kind of a nascent sort of industry that doesn't have the workforce that maybe you always see the joke of like someone wanting someone out of school with 8 years of experience, and it doesn't work like that. And it's a tricky thing to break into, and yet it's accessible to everyone.
It is. It still has the ethereal space to it, and there's no certification of any level of establishment, right? You do see a lot of SaaS platforms and reporting platforms contribute back into a level of education. Again, it's a bit of a nepotism because you're getting certified on their product, right? But there are no standalone certification houses or scholastic programs that really teach. Not only they teach the basics, but not contemporary SEO. Not the things that we're understanding that Google's doing with BERT and MUM. There's just no space in there. So inherently, SEO is a continued wild west scenario where it's edgy. It's constantly trying to experiment to be able to learn what's working, what's not working at that moment. Would you agree, Garrett?
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting thing that you bring up, and when you're talking about BERT and MUM, MUM, whatever we're calling it, is that Google itself is also evolving. So, what was, traditional SEO, like trying to rank for the 10 blue links, it's a completely different paradigm now, right? Like when we're talking about one of the hot topics in our world is search intent, and making sure that you're surfacing your content and being visible for the things that your customers are searching for. Mm-hmm. And that can become, a little tricky minefield to navigate of like, where do I invest my time in terms of trying to rank for certain type of content? What can I rank for? What's going to get me, the most top of the funnel volume versus what's actually going to generate revenue for my business? And so the changing nature of search intent and Google makes SEO infinitely harder. Plus, there's so much more competition out there when it comes to content. Mm-hmm. And you see this marriage of the SEO skills and the content skills, which are becoming more and more a requirement for these types of, in-house positions.
No, I'm tracking with you. So we had done a show a while back about the pros and cons of hiring an external agency as opposed to internal. I don't want to rehash that explicitly, but I do want to actually cover the scenario that clients find themselves in whenever they're deciding to hire an external SEO, because let's say that they've committed to the path of actually hiring external. Backtracking a little bit, I still think that there's meat on the bone here whenever you're talking about the state of understanding SEO and how complex it is. And it's not just technical, it's conceptual, it's the semantic SEO world that we're navigating right now. If you actually pull in someone into an in-house role from, in the SEO market, right, finding those skills, how do you actually find the true contemporary skills as opposed to skills that came out of a decade ago where it's just technical SEO, they're just writing titles, they're just writing meta descriptions, they're just filling out their alt images, and that is what they consider SEO. The client doesn't know the difference between what's happening right now compared to what is still legitimate SEO, but it's nowhere near the main thoroughfare, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more holistic, and it goes all the way back to the keyword research, like the strategy behind the SEO, and then the ongoing changes. So like to your point, you have an in-house SEO. There's still a ton of value to hire an agency to supplement their efforts, whether it's surfacing insights of like, just whenever you're in a mastermind, right? Everyone's bouncing ideas off of each other. Yep. Nobody, will always figure it out themselves. And especially the larger the website, the larger the enterprise, the more there is to do. And you have problems of like having to adjust at scale. In our industry, the big thing right now is Core Web Vitals, where it's making sure your page speed is, as fast as possible, or you're not having any sort of like cumulative shift where ads are bouncing around and leading to a bad page experience. And doing that for a massive enterprise that's working on some sort of legacy platform can be a lot to handle for your in-house team. And so it's not to say that they can't do it. The agency becomes like kind of this super team, superpower like supplement to your in-house, whether it's from insights or execution and implementation.
That's a really good point. And it's that hybrid model that actually can serve a couple of different scenarios. One, it gives the additional set of eyes, right? And it's your bit of an insurance that if anything's going on internally, whatever you have your internal team doing, that's being approved or at least checked on with the external agency side of things. But it also allows you as the owner of the firm to be able to ensure that your internal resources are being presented contemporary education and knowledge, and it's a continued investment of R&D. Just the proximity towards being involved with a SEO agency. That's always been the limitation that I've seen that maybe clients or companies don't understand, is that once you actually take that individual out of the competitive water of multiple websites, perhaps even out of an agency setting, and they are specifically optimizing your content just for your company, you're unplugging them from the learning experience in all the different vertical markets in industries. And on top of that, they're not around peers that would actually help forge their steel just by being inside that agency. So being able to have that individual still coupled with an agency model, if companies can afford it, is truly ensuring longevity of skill sets for that individual. Boy, that was a long-winded sentence.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to take that even a step further is when you start to add into the elements of the nuances between industries or the type of businesses, like working with an agency that might have an experience with other businesses similar to yours, sure, that another generalist might not understand, can also amplify the productivity and the value that an agency brings. So for instance, like, at iPullRank, we work with a lot of e-commerce brands or media publishers. What a media publisher has to focus on in terms of the vast amounts of topical content that they need to keep fresh and they have in their archive. What do you do with all that, especially as, if you're working on a legacy framework and you need to update a significant amount of your site architecture because, the way it was done only maybe 5-7 years ago was wrong or was not the best practice for today. Or with e-commerce, when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of product pages, right, that's a very completely unique, different problem than a SaaS company with, a 50-page website, right?
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. So that integration does really benefit in so many ways. What would you say would be the potential pitfalls of, let's take, for example, a medium-sized company, 50 employees, 100 employees, and they're looking to hire that SEO firm. What are some of the pitfalls that you've witnessed just being in the reporting manufacturing side of things that you see fail whenever clients first bring on these agencies?
Yeah, that's a good question. When it comes to like the relationship between the agency and the client, obviously having experience is going to matter. If you've seen it over and over again, if you're starting off for the first time, there's the potential for mistakes. And really, the agency client relationship's all about trust, right? And all about establishing that sort of like relationship where you're dependable, you're reliable. And so if the trust gets broken early on by either providing incorrect information or, making a technical mistake, you're going to lose that trust. And that's one of the major pitfalls that we saw is it's hard to recover that trust, especially because historically in the SEO industry, it's kind of like reputation. It didn't have a great reputation, right? Like there would be people who would be using, black hat techniques that weren't, kosher, if you will, that ultimately bit a company's website in the butt in the end. And so, a lot of companies might be skeptical when they hire their next SEO agency in the future. So you also have to make up for, their past misgivings.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. All businesses are kind of like on their digital marketing agency journey. Is that I hate to say it, but you'll never just have that one agency right out of the box. You're going to have to experience learning, and a lot of times the digital agency was doing the right thing, but the client was misunderstanding what they were communicating to the agency or what was communicated back. And all of a sudden you're in a poor communication role and a lack of understanding on the client side as well. So we certainly want to look at the foundational role of trust, right? But before anything, shouldn't there be like a common lexicon, a common hymn book to be able to sing from of not only these are the efforts, but what really is important to you, client, on lead conversion and any of the KPIs? What's expected of the client to communicate to that agency? And if there are owners of companies or marketing officers of companies, should they be prepared to provide these agencies that they work with?
Yeah, there are so many opportunities for discovery between the agencies and the customers early on. And it's really critical setting expectations. And, early on, a lot of times the agency also has to kind of act as an educator. Yep. So there is, to your point, kind of learning the speak, educating the client. The client might have ideas of what they think they want, and it's through the conversations of what are the goals of the agency supposed to provide in SEO. Is it like, is the client just interested in vanity metrics, and does the agency have to explain how that ties to the actual business KPIs that are going to impact revenue?
Right.
And so whether that happens in a contact form on your website to the initial intake form that a client might fill out versus the first discovery call to talk through the problem, these are all touch points that an agency should always kind of reflect on, iterate on, refine, and make sure that they're both, identifying their value prop and what they're offering, but also the way that they interact with the client. Because it's tricky with agencies. Like, you can productize your service, but there's always, especially for the bigger companies, they need bespoke solutions.
Right.
So a lot of times it's not like a one size fit all. You need that discovery call to surface, client needs to give access to the agency for all of their, existing accounts to do that first audit in the first place.
Right. As I'm hearing you, I see that there's a evolution of a relationship with clients, and I think there's also maturity on both sides, agencies and clients respectively. And there's an evolution of how to actually find your way with KPIs and performance metrics that maybe the client wasn't expecting to be able to communicate about or even learn about. And we'll talk about this in the second segment when we talk about buyer's journey content, because there's a whole nother space in there of learning potential for this relationship. But what would you say would be some of the key breakdowns and I hate to go negative here because we certainly want to see the opportunities, but what would you say would be the key breakdowns between inside of the agency-client relationship? Just top of mind, some of the things that you may have witnessed or experienced. I know you're new in the game of actually being part of the agency, so I wouldn't hold you to that. But what have you witnessed over your years?
Well, to your point, a lot of my experience comes from talking to consultants and agencies through my podcast, through customers at the SaaS companies that I worked for. And the breakdowns were usually around scope creep. So like having in the contract, setting the scope as well as setting the contingencies for if a project was going to exceed that scope. Setting the expectations, as mentioned, the communication style. So, really establishing that with the client. Like all clients are different. I remember I talked to Emily Brady of Milestone a ways back, and she talked about the SEO love language, where, some people wanted to talk constantly and wanted just reporting. Someone just wanted to know the wins. Someone wanted, the daily update. I think there's a combination of the breakdown. If you're not on the same page with your client about both the cadence and the reporting style expectations,
right,
then the client can become upset because you're not talking the way that they want to hear.
Oh my gosh, I never thought to actually put in my onboarding document, what's your love language? But I mean, honestly, you really should, because a lot of we look at it internally of, okay, what's the preferred method of communication with clients? Because by and large, you actually kind of walked me around the DISC model in a lot of ways there. But if a client's expecting phone calls and expects to be connected that way, right? And potentially, if they're way too busy of looking at their own email, or if they're just not wired that way, you as an agency cannot stay in that pocket. You're doing yourself some negative data points, even though you're actually moving the content in front of them, moving the reporting in front of them. The sheer fact that you're not picking up the phone whenever there's a preferred method of communication that's been established, you're actually digging yourself a hole. You may be thinking that you're reporting great, but each and every time that email comes through and they're not getting a phone call to talk about it.
And to your point, I mean, I think on the flip side of that, as an agency, you have to have some hard internal discussions about setting boundaries, right? Like, you want to be that agency that delivers the 6-10 star service to your clients. Sure. But it's also fair to say you work a 9 to 5, or if you're comfortable. We live in this hustle culture where it's almost like not professionally acceptable to say you work a 9 to 5 as an agency. But it's fair to set those expectations and set those boundaries. And when you have that conversation at the get-go, and it's not necessarily standing up for yourself, but just saying, like, this is how we operate. If this doesn't work for you, then maybe we're not the right fit. Yep. It takes guts, but it's the right thing to do, and it'll save a lot of headache in the long run.
Absolutely. We call it the while we're still friends conversation.
I love that.
But it is absolutely correct, is that you have to set boundaries, in response time expectation and the like of what's on fire and what's not type of association of urgency. But when it gets down to it, you got to be able to evolve, but you also have to be, as an agency, be willing to back away, and I think it's the largest amount of respect that you can actually provide a client. If we don't have your communication needs matched, you're better suited to invest your dollars with someone else that can actually run that gamut. I mean, you're actually doing them such a service before they've dropped 20 grand and learn that lesson the hard way. And again, you have to have a agency stable enough and willing to actually protect that relationship more than anything else. I mean, it's an odd thing to be able to walk away from the table and walk away from those dollars on the table as well, right?
Oh yeah, and as an agency owner, I mean, you have your own goals, right? Yeah, I've had a lot of interesting conversations with folks where, some agencies, their goal is to scale, to become as big as possible, take on as many clients as possible. Whereas others are like, we know what we do it well, we stay small, lean, we're very selective with our clients, and we charge, a lot. The other thing, and one thing I love about our industry, even the agency industry, is that so many people, I'll say, get along, and developing kind of relationships with other agencies is such a smart thing to do, where you can become a referral network.
There you go.
Like have those agencies that might do the type of work or the type of communication style that's not you. Feel free to refer them over. You'll feel less bad about saying goodbye to that client. And then, as long as it's reciprocal, that other agency will be sending work your way. So there are ways to navigate that where it doesn't feel like you're just saying no to money.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'd be remiss if I actually didn't recognize the other list of agencies that you would want to refer that problematic client to as well. But we'll just leave that one aside. Going into the challenges in creating content with clients, specifically the buyer's journey. Now, for everybody who's playing at home who hasn't heard the buyer's journey before, we have awareness content, consideration content, and decision-making content, the funnel that we have all known and loved for such a long time, right? There's a process to actually get that information from our clients. And that right there is a place where I wanted to toss it up to you, because you have had a strong relationship with clients reporting on content. What's your experience in trying to be able to work with clients and be able to mine some of that very useful but ubiquitous buyer's journey content?
Well, to your point, there are these different stages, and the really important aspect of the buyer's journey is kind of step one, which is identifying your personas, which I think at this point, it's weird, because I think personas have almost fallen out of favor in marketing. Like, people want to only focus on segments while they're different things. Personas really are kind of a aggregate of all of the different data that you can pull together, whether it's like the firmographics, the psychographics, the demographics. Like, who are these people? Who are your customers? What are their needs? What are they wanting? Where are they along the funnel of discovering who you are? And once you understand that, it's only then can you really start to create the content that resonates with them. Otherwise, it's really a lot of guesswork.
It is, and it's and content can be in the echo chamber for such a long time that doesn't resonate, but actually pushes users away, or first experiencing your content either on site or off site. If you as a client are just putting out content that you think your customers would want to hear, then you haven't gone through the formula, you haven't gone through the discovery process of what's really happening. So can you how can you make it easier for a client to participate in the process of discovery? Because a lot of times clients come to an agency and they already think they know exactly who their users or their personas are, right? How do you break down and chisel down that wall?
Well, I think the clients are the original source of truth when it comes to audience research. Like, you really need to talk through and get all of those points, of where they've met their clients or where they've seen their clients or buyers. I mean, the interesting thing is this is always iterative as well. It's something that's ongoing. You think about how we've all changed in the last, 12 to 16 months, and how our behavior has changed as a result of this global pandemic. Like, everyone's personas have changed.
You better believe it. Yeah.
And they're still changing. I mean, as we go back to, obviously there are countries all around the world that are still in lockdown. And then, here in the US, people are going back to this new normal. Oh, I just said this new normal. Don't hit me. I was
bingo.
That guy. I know. It's like Pee-wee's Playhouse. We need everyone jumping out. But I think that you start with the client and you start with the client's customers. And it really is those conversations. Now, people might think, oh, do I have to talk to, 100 different people? And that's not necessarily the case.
Sure.
You can talk to 20, 10, 20 customers and have those deep conversations, use tools like surveys and whether that's via email or just putting it on your website, or even like sending out like market research firms to do, the research to the various, kind of focus groups. And then identifying, there's so many places that people hang out online,
right.
Figuring out where those are, whether it's, are they finding you through organic search? Are they finding you through social media? Are they finding you through forums? There's so many places to dig, and there are cool tools out there too. I mean, if you look at, you mentioned Ram Fishkin, his tool Sparktoro is all about audience discovery. Like, what podcasts do your people, do your audience listen to? Like, where are they buying? What stores do they go to? All that helps kind of formulate these personas.
Absolutely. You mentioned the change that your consumers are going through as well right now. We've all gone through that, and isn't this like a perfect opportunity to be able to, if agencies have not move their client into the discovery of the buyer's journey, what a great opportunity to be able to say, you know what, your customers are changing. Let's look at some old habits. Let's look at the new habits and the new consumption that they've got, and then be able to match those. So, sometimes there's a bit more of a hard-headed client can actually be persuaded based on events such as this. Although we've never had an event over the last year like this before, but if you get them pivoted into understanding that their consumer activity is changing, their consumption of content, and what they're learning about problem solving, being able to capitalize on this last year and moving into that space is probably one of the most beneficial things that they could do, right?
Oh yeah, as an agency, the most important thing is to position it as opportunity. Right? Like, last segment we were talking about reporting and talking about expectations and goals. And like, if you are driving a ton of organic traffic to your site, but it's not resulting in any sort of actual new customers, then like, is that really helpful to your business? And if all of a sudden, you have this whole, new persona that looks as your product is exactly what they want, and you're not marketing to them, you're not producing content for them, you're just preventing your own growth. And as an agency, that's the first place I would say that there's so much value in re-auditing your personas if you already have them, or doing it for the first time if you've never done it before, because there's opportunity there's revenue to be driven there, and it will kind of impact your whole marketing strategy, whether your agency's helping you with it or not.
Opportunity is that key that unlocks a huge amount of creation of content. What would you recommend of areas to avoid while working with a client that's new to this discovery procedure, getting into these deeper areas of content? Any paths traversed that you say, you know what, not for the first time clients that are understanding that they have to really pick up and understand their users in a whole nother level?
Well, I think it's very important to be collaborative and not like, telling customers exactly what they should know. Like you're still kind of an educator, but you're also working with them in the discovery process. So, if you remove yourself from the process, from them during this process, and then come back with the results, that's not going to get the same sort of buy-in than if they were along for the journey, and then showing your proof along the way. So, if you bring their customers into the fold and they see it for their own eyes, then that's that they're more likely to buy in that way as well. So, obviously, the clients are too busy. That's why they hired you to do all of it. But to identify, little touch points along the way to keep them involved in the process will most lead to more success and a better relationship.
That's well said. Well said. I do think I liken us to the term of data Sherpas now, is that maybe they've not even gone through this process before, and we're also assisting them in the discovery of their consumers' behavior in a whole nother light. And that gets me to kind of a last point about the buyer's journey content process. And I know we haven't unfolded the entire process here, but when it comes down to clients understanding the metrics of buyer's journey content, and again, let's just focus on site, is that clients that haven't experienced this before are learning this new way to actually understand their consumer's journey, and they can't see direct line of sight ROI, right? Because you have developed software for agencies before, what are some great steps to be able to communicate the value of buyer's journey that doesn't directly go into a transaction cash register sound effect,
Yeah, well, it really is part of this whole funnel, right? And having specific metrics that you want to hit along the funnel, no matter what type of, business you're working for, working with. So, with, e-commerce, maybe that is like putting product, obviously purchasing the products as the end game, but like putting the products into the cart, getting to the checkout, looking at different product pages, looking, using the search bar and going through that whole process. If SaaS, was all about getting folks to the demo or the free trial. So like that's the step before them becoming subscribed customers. Mm-hmm. Before that, maybe it's like downloading some of your content to show that their interest. And so as an agency, depending on how deep you're going into the services you're offering your client, because we're talking about, we have a lot of SEO services, but there are a ton of agencies that do CRO, conversion rate optimization all the way through to make sure that if you're getting people further down the funnel, it's not broken at some place that prevents them from ultimately driving the revenue, which is that kind of final goal.
Absolutely. So train the clients on the metrics. And I think this back to our previous podcast of while we're still friends, right? Here's what we need to measure. So we have the agreed upon hymn book to be able to sing from collectively, right? So we know those KPIs, we're agreeing upon it. You got to get the buy-in from the client on not only generating the content, but also watching what to measure. They got to be along for the ride. And you also have to be transparent as well, that some metrics can be seen differently, right? And can be behavior can be inferred. It's not an exact science. We have to be able to have a much larger holistic picture than just looking at the bounce rates on an awareness piece of content, right?
Yeah, and it's hard in general too as marketers. I mean, we struggle with attribution constantly, and technology is only making it more difficult, as Apple, increases the privacy with their new versions of iOS, or, Google just delayed, removing cookies, third-party cookies, but it's becoming harder and harder to tie a lot of these metrics to the ultimate, revenue KPIs or customer KPIs. So it's not going to get easier. That said, it's important to identify which kind of are part of that like whole assisted conversions. Like I remember when I was working at Great Us, and it was help people get online reviews. So get Google reviews, which was really important in the local space. Now, a Google review, a 5-star Google review isn't necessarily going to say, oh, you got the 5-star review, that equals one new customer.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily work like that. That said, you can kind of, it's a directional type of metric, right? You can see the trends in as you improve your quantity and quality of reviews, you're going to see more visibility. You're going to see more customers down the line. You're going to see more calls on your Google My Business listing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of trying to connect the dots, even when it's not directly attributable.
Yeah, it's not linear, and I think clients, by and large, or I should say companies that are contemporary companies that are affecting digital marketing, get that more than ever before. They have to, because it's a long game. There are certainly short games involved in the paid campaign side of things, but even that, you're still dealing with a digitally savvy audience, a consumer base, that they're going to be evaluating content, products, services with their own pathway to that said evaluate. So you've got to be there in the conversation, and that's where you bring in other competitors who is also participating in the conversation of ideas for those consumers. So the clients get an idea that it's not just flipping a switch and creating content, and over a period of time, if it doesn't work well, you move away from it. They have to know the larger set that they're on, and the other competitors that are still there producing that content and orientating towards what those consumers are needing. Again, not a long-winded sentence, but you also have to give them context as well, right?
Yeah, I think you hit on something that's really important, which is being aware of your competitors. Right? Like seeing what they're doing that might be working, or finding gaps of what they're not doing that you can kind of, fit in.
Yep.
Your competitors a lot of times are the best gauge of your own performance. And so, that's, I think, a big part of the puzzle when everything is changing and evolving. And I also loved what you said about it's not always linear. You do, as a client or as any sort of logical person, you want to see from A to B, is this like up and to the right? Whereas we know the reality of the world is like, you'll get some wins, especially as a marketer, you'll get some wins for things that you didn't think had any right to be successful. And some things you were darn sure certain were going to be the huge win doesn't produce anything. And that goes back to the agency client relationship, where you got to have that trust, because not every campaign is going to knock it out of the park. But the client shouldn't just bail if 9 out of 10 campaigns do. So you got to have that sort of relationship. You got to communicate. You got to be on the same page, and you have to earn that sort of respect and mutual trust between you and your clients.
Very good, very good. Oh, the last point on that trust factor is, from an agency standpoint, you have to have that internal barometer with account managers and producers, anybody that's in the space and aware of the client. You have to have that mirror going, okay, how much do they trust us? How much do they have confidence in what we're doing? And you just can't sit behind your spreadsheet. You can't sit behind your SEO tactics and expect the client is on the same page, pun intended. You have to have that quick, Scrum concept. Okay, where are we in our relationship with our client? And it has to be constantly honed, right? Like putting logs in the fire. Otherwise, you're not hitting their love language, and they're going to start eyeballing other agencies, because there is that grass greener mindset. And how many analogies can I actually string together in one concept? I have freaking no clue, but I'm trying my best. Going for 8 now, but it's that the client's mindset does wander. The eye does wander. Okay, maybe we just don't know what we're not getting from this agency. And then if you're falling on your foot 1 or 2 times with a couple negative data points, you got to make sure that part of your account management is this table touching, right? How are we doing? How can we do something better for you?
Oh yeah, I mean that goes back to the communication and those like touch points and the check-ins. Like the QBRs are huge, in especially with the larger businesses. I feel like, with massive enterprises or just with massive companies, it's harder to move. That's why a lot of companies don't move, whether it's, agencies or software vendors. But there are signs that you can pick up on as to if they're starting to put their feelers out there. Now,
Sure.
Now some are, some like move like icebergs in the dark sea, but you like that one?
I do.
But if you're checking in with your clients, like that's why, the account managers are so important at every agency. Like I've been with iPullRank for a month and a couple weeks now, and I'm going to toot the horn. We have cool account managers. I absolutely adore them, and it's those are like the glue that really keep going. Like Chantel and Sarah kill it, and they have such great relationships with the clients, and I see them interact, and it's really just the emotional intelligence, the checking in, the understanding, what they're. The SEO love language, the understanding communication style. I think it all kind of is part of that process. It's part of that agency's buyer journey to, continue to develop that loyalty of being on the same page.
Very good. So that was the last stop I wanted to make along this client and an agency relationship. There's much more to unpack, and maybe we can do another round of unpacking SEO reporting love language. I just never thought I'd actually have those words in one sentence. That's amazing. See, right brain, left brain. There is coexistence here, folks. But I did want to bring our final point around to your endeavors on your podcast, Garrett, because you didn't have something March of last year, and you plowed through so much content, some great interviews with a lot of key people. Give me your thoughts of the aggressive work that you did in the past year. What have you learned from that?
So the thing I learned and that I love about the SEO industry is that there are so many voices that deserve the opportunity to share how they think about SEO, their perspective on marketing, that are finding those opportunities more and more. I think there's a history of, that you see the same speakers at conferences, and they're all brilliant people. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but you'll see a lot of similar people, veterans of the agency who have been doing it year after year, and they've earned that right. But it is a competitive, world that we're in. And we were talking about that with content. With the podcast, I would, reach out to my network on Twitter and I'd say, who do I need to talk to? And I want different types of voices, because from different types of voices and different experiences, different backgrounds, and, different, demographics brings different perspectives. I was so thankful to Arija Abouali, who had the Women in Tech SEO community that she's built over the last 2 years, provide so many women who are just doing amazing things in tech SEO and having them on my podcast, so many to count, but then also the, people of color, joining my podcast and talking about those issues in our industry, like diversity and how that, manifests itself in a fair and safe place in the work environment. And so all of these conversations were, on the one hand, the nature of the SEO industry, techniques, tactics, strategies, but it was also discovering stories of people. And I know you've done, more than 400 episodes, Aaron. It's like all these people that you have on have such interesting stories, and it's fun to share that with our community.
Yeah, except for that one guy, but we won't talk about him.
Yeah, long hair, beard, glasses, kind of looks like you. Yeah.
No,
you do too.
Wait a minute. You're absolutely right, and it does keep winning your sales whenever you're interacting with the people that are truly fighting the good fight, not only in our skill sets in our industry, right, but also for larger causes that just to be able to lift our industry. So I've been amazed at what you've been able to do, and are you gonna be more importantly, are you gonna be picking it up again?
It's funny. I need that creative outlet, and I need to find ways to participate. We actually, so at iPullRank, we have a fantastic podcast already. Checking out, it's Jarrett Thomas. It's the Rankable podcast. We're on a brief hiatus, but we're coming back for season 2 starting in August. But it's so fun to support him. And so, in the podcasting journey, I feel like I do miss it, whether I do it independent of iPullRank. I will find an opportunity for content creation, some video opportunities, some ways to just express. I like to talk, man.
Sure.
And I can't help it. I like to talk. So I'll probably join Jarrett from time to time, but he's a fantastic host. So.
No, you guys are doing well. I am going to say that Michael King was actually driving in Indiana, and he did not stop by the studio. So we're going to actually publicly shame him here a little bit later on.
in his brand new car. Yeah,
I know.
You find him on Twitter.
Yeah, we will. We will.
You let him know.
Well, kudos to everything you've done. Certainly finding your way behind the microphone again, because you've been killing it. And you were doing it with care and focus on lifting up those individuals. So it wasn't for your own services or your own production. It was to just tell people stories and allow people to unpack what they're all about. So kudos, man.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, it was selfish. I like talking to people. I like all these cool people, and they have such interesting things. They're all so nice. Yeah, I love all the nice people in our industry.
Yeah, they are. Well, is there anything that we can promote for you on this show today?
Oh man, so I'm just getting my feet wet. I am demanding generation for iPullRank. So, if anything, check out the agency, check out Mike King and our team. We do technical SEO, content strategy, audience research, and personas. So always looking for new clients, but find me on Twitter. I just want to talk to people. We don't even need to do a podcast. Let's just hang out on a Zoom call if you're not tired of Zoom.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is one of the coolest agencies across the country. So kudos to you guys. And you're with a good group, and I'm glad you found your way there, Garrett. So thanks for joining us at a quick tick. And we certainly would want to have you come back around on the show, sir.
Thank you, Aaron. Absolutely. Anytime. You got me.
More than welcome. More than welcome. Make sure you track down Garrett on his Twitter handle at Twitter. No, just don't search for Twitter. You won't find Garrett there. Garrett Sussman is his handle. GarrettSussman. You couldn't get a double N at the end of that, Garrett?
I thought about a couple extra A's, couple extra E's, but, the R's and T's work for me.
As well as Garrett Sussman over at LinkedIn. And we certainly lift up iPullRank as they're one of the killer agencies here right now and have been for a long time. So kudos to all the team over there. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're really feeling up today, we certainly would appreciate a review of this show as well as others because that's what makes our site come to the top on the algorithms. Thanks to our sponsor, Site Strategics, as well as Wix. And be sure to check out all the must-see videos over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. We're going to be talking to J.D. Prater and Joe Martinez coming up soon. Want to check those out as well as our regular weekly digital marketing news. So from everyone over at Edge, be safe, be well, and do not be a piece of cider driftwood. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.